Hi, friends. Today's episode is part 1 of my journey. Today's episode is mostly about Cajun, but it is about Izzy and Fiona as well. This episode shares what I have learned along the way in small portions, and I hope to share the rest of my journey with you throughout the years on this podcast. Thank you so much for being here and for being a part of the Straight Up Dog Talk family. Thank you for your support and your love, and I hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, a new kind of podcast where no topic is off limits. We're bringing in experts and owners to have the conversations we should be having as a dog community. Each week, a new guest will share firsthand experiences, educational resources, or professional guidance to help you learn and grow along with your dog. You won't get one perspective here, you'll get them all, because every dog is different and every owner is too.
You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk, or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms.
Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. I'm Em, and we're back again with Josh.
Hello.
And this week, we're finally going to start sharing my story. We're going to kind of let Josh take over as main host tonight and guide me through this episode, since I have about 30 years of working with animals, and this will probably be definitely more than just one episode, but I figured that since this is falling on a special date, that this was a great day for me to release this episode. The day that this episode released is July 3rd, 2024. You guys all know that because that's the date today, but today is a very special day. Today is the 10th anniversary of my first dog's death.
So I've got some notes here. We've talked about this before, obviously, in our friendship. But how old were you when your first dog passed?
My first dog was Vince. I was 16 years old, and he was, one of our family dogs. He was probably the first dog that I really formed an attachment to, really remember. We got Vince when I was 6 years old, and he was named Vincent after Vincent van Gogh. He was born out of a litter of golden retrievers. My parents' friends used to breed golden retrievers, and they were AKC standard retrievers. And the reason that we got Vince was because he was the runt of the litter, and his mom licked him and licked him and licked him and licked him so much that his ear became brittle and she bit it off. So he had this wonky ear that didn't have a flap that just stood up kind of funny. And my dad thought that it would be, hilarious to name him after Vincent van Gogh. And so that was my first dog. And he was a fantastic dog. He's a golden retriever. So
dumb as a box of rocks.
He was, but he was also awesome. He let us put clothes on him. He was supposed to be my dad's dog, but he slept with me. He did everything with me. And unfortunately, when it ended, he was only 10 years old, and I was 16, and my parents made the decision to put him down because he had early onset dementia, and he was tearing up the duct that goes from the dryer to the wall, that metal hose. He was ripping it up and ripping his face open, and he was, wandering around, and his quality of life was definitely going down. But my parents decided to call me and tell me at school that they were putting him down and not let me go, which I didn't realize until later in my life how much that was a huge effect on me. But it did kind of derail me because at that point, I was a sophomore in high school. I was going to be a veterinarian. I had plans, to go to Iowa and get my degree in animal science and then move on to veterinary school. And that is not what happened. I did not deal with his death very well. And I didn't know if I would ever get a dog again because of that.
So you're 2 years younger than me?
Yeah, I graduated in 99, and so I just aged myself for everyone.
But this would have been 97.
Yeah.
Okay. The year I graduated. So we're going to go from 97. You stop. What did you end up going to college for?
I was an English and psychology major.
Hey, listen, English majors work in supply chain.
But I did go back to college eventually for
Right.
animal science. I just wasn't able to finish my degree, but we'll get into that.
Right. But how long was it until you had another experience with another dog? Like until you
Till I connected with another dog?
connected with another.
Because my parents got several dogs after
Right.
that. And, we had already had like Mac, who was our first Scotty at that point. And so it was a pretty good relationship with Mac, but not the same. So 96, 97 until 2005 when I got Cajun.
Okay. So tell us about that.
So I originally didn't plan on getting Cajun. The story of Cajun is, the traditional, you're in your 20s and you probably shouldn't have gotten a dog, but you got a dog anyway. I was living in Orlando, Florida, and I had 2 cats that I'd had for a few years. They were like 3 and 4, 4 and 5, somewhere in there. And I was at PetSmart getting cat litter for them and cat food. And there was a PetSmart charities going on that day. And I decided that I would just walk over and look. And there was, of course, puppies everywhere. And the dog that became Cajun was very energetic, very excited to see me. His name at the time was actually Hercules, which obviously had to go. He was Hercules. Yeah. Exactly. That's why it had to go. But, he was brindle and he was about 5 months old, and he had been forced to live in a kennel his entire life up to that point. And the woman told me that he had not interacted with anyone at the shelter. He had not interacted with anybody at the PetSmart charities. And this dog was wiggling and whining and trying to get out of his kennel to get to me. So I finally said, okay. And I took him out and I walked around the store with him. And I told her, look, I'm going to have to think about this because I was not planning on doing this today. And she's like, well, you'll need a check. And I said, well, that's a problem because I don't have a check. And she said, well, we can't hold him.
Mm.
So, if you leave, and this was all the way across town in Orlando, like I drove 30 minutes to go to this PetSmart so that I wouldn't have to go to the busy PetSmart. Because when you live in a big city like that, you learn very quickly that you don't want to be in the tourist areas. And so I called my friend Lacey, and Lacey had a key to my apartment, and she went over and she got my checkbook and she drove all the way across town and brought it to me. And I went back and I wrote a check. And for $200, I got Cajun, 2 bowls, a leash, collar, a kennel, and a bag of food.
Wow. That's actually a really good deal.
Really kind of unheard of nowadays.
Yeah. I think Ollie was 250 and that was just him. And then they ended up like throwing in some of the stuff. Like he'd gotten really attached to this blanket. And so they gave me the blanket, but everything else I had to go buy.
Yeah, they gave me his first appointment with the veterinary staff for free because obviously he wasn't fully vaccinated because he was only 5 months old. Mm-hmm. And then they gave me a coupon so that his neuter would be free. So I didn't have to pay for anything but his vaccinations and his deworming. And it was taking him to that first vet appointment that made me go, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to do with my life. And this is not what I'm doing with my life. I was working at an endodontics office as a receptionist, and I was checking dental health insurance benefits and collecting payments from people who were getting root canals, because that's what endodontists do, is root canals. And it was a great job, don't get me wrong. I loved the staff. I loved the employer, and the doctors that I worked for were great, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. And so I brought Cajun home. And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering by now, why the heck did you name this dog Cajun? My roommate was from Louisiana, and he was straight up a Cajun. And he thought that it would be great to name the dog Cajun because he was very, very much from Louisiana at the accent and everything. And he kept saying, just name him Cajun, just name him Cajun. And I was like, with his brindle coat, he kind of does look like a bunch of spices. So I feel like Cajun is an appropriate name. And that's just what it was.
Be glad, Cajun, you could have been named Gumbo.
Or Po' Boy.
Jambalaya.
That was actually a suggestion.
Po' Boy?
Yeah.
Hey, well.
Told you, straight up Louisiana, man. So my roommate was awesome about the whole thing. He did not care at all. He was super glad to have a dog. He helped walk him. He helped with everything with him. But Cajun was my luck dog. I had to train him to go on a leash, but I never hired a trainer for him. I didn't do anything traditional with him. The most traditional thing that I did with him was he had to be reverse kennel trained because, like I said, he lived the first 5 months in a kennel, which means he ate, he drank, he peed, he pooped, he slept in his kennel. So he didn't understand the outside world and going out and going to the bathroom and doing all of the things. And so there was a period of an adjustment there.
That's interesting because Ollie, when I got him, was a puppy mill dog. He was 3, and he had always been in the kennel. Same thing, everything. Except once he was out of the kennel, he never wanted to go back in there. Like, it took us years before of just the kennel being in the corner with an open door in case he wanted a space, but he never wanted to go back.
So that was Cajun, but because of the landlord and the apartment rules, he had to be kept in a kennel. So let me tell you, when I say that there was poop splatters on the wall and in the kennel and all of the things from his anxiety, it was a very real thing. It was a thing that was difficult because very shortly after I got him, my parents decided to come and visit me. And my dad was like, oh, we can take care of this. So he puts the kennel in the back of his Subaru because they drove down. And we go to one of those car washes and he just power washes the whole kennel off and we, shake it off and we put it back in the back of his car. And my dad's like, well, while we're here, let's go ahead and take the car through the car wash. And I never, ever again was able to take Cajun through a car wash. He's, probably 40 or 50 pounds at this point. He was about halfway grown. He got up to about 90 pounds in his prime. Jumped out of the back seat between my dad's legs into the where the pedals and underneath the steering wheel and was down there shaking because he was absolutely terrified of what was happening. And my dad was just like, oh my God, what's happening? Like this dog just completely just dove down here. And so we had to wait for the car wash to be over and then get out of the car and get Cajun out and move everything all around so that we could get situated and leave again. That's something that I'll never forget. So Cajun was bad at 2 things: car washes and bath. Everything else, he was a perfect angel. Perfect angel. I took him to the beach like so many times. We would go to Daytona because Daytona lets you have a dog on a leash with their rabies vaccination. And Daytona also used to let you at that point in time, drive your car onto the beach. So we would just back my SUV up onto the beach and we'd have a fire, we'd have Cajun. But he was so small at that point that I had one of those I remember it was navy blue and it had stars. And it was one of those cinch backpacks with the drawstrings. And I would just put Cajun inside of it and then carry him around with him on my back. And he would go everywhere with me. And our little theme song was Soak Up the Sun. And we would listen to that and go to the beach. And then we would, play on the beach. And he loved it. He loved the beach, which is so funny because he hated baths, but he loved the beach. He loved the beach. And everything that I did, everywhere that I went, he always went. And sometimes he was on a leash and sometimes he wasn't on a leash. It just depended on the situation. He loved everyone and he loved every dog and he loved kids and he just loved life. I think that, he was one of those dogs that realized that he was in a much better situation. And, somebody at one point, it was my ex-husband, had me put a shock collar on him because he was barking and we didn't need him to be barking when the neighbors were out. And I used that shock collar on him one time and I remember him bucking like a horse And then from that point on, I never put the shock collar on him again because I felt so bad. But anytime I picked up a remote, it didn't matter if it was the TV remote or the Apple TV remote or the Xbox controller, he would sit down because he thought that that was, you know, the thing for that. That right there shows you how much I've evolved as an owner, because I won't probably ever use a shock collar or an e-collar again. But we are where we are now.
So according to the timeline that I have, you only lived in Florida with him for a month.
Well, actually, it was a little bit longer than a month. But yeah, so in the middle of all of me getting a dog, I was also, you know, like talking to my now ex-husband about, you know, us like finally getting together and living in the same state because he lived in Texas. So I got Cajun, and then like 6 weeks later, he got neutered. And then I moved to Texas, and I legitimately just packed up everything in my SUV, my 2 cats, my dog, and all of the stuff that I could fit. And I drove to Texas, which, you know, I can tell you, having a big dog and being a female traveling with a big dog like that, stopping at some of the gas stations and things that I did, I even got a nail in my tire and got a flat tire and had like people help me, and everybody was very wary of him and like, oh, your dog is scary. But I mean, he was a big dog, and if you knew him, you would know that he was the biggest baby and he wasn't going to hurt you or bite you or growl at you even. But people saw him and they went, oh, that's a big dog. And so we traveled by ourselves, and we got to Texas, and we started a life there. Cajun lived in 3 states with me. He literally was with me for 10 years, and he went through everything with me. And so we get to Texas, and you know, now he's in a new environment, and now he has a swimming pool, which he loved. Again,
Still hates baths,
but loves the swimming pool. Now, the swimming pool had like this little, it was like a step down. You'd step down, and there was this huge landing that had a fountain. And the fountain would shoot like 10 feet up in the air, and you could control like how high and how hard the water pressure was. And we would just crank it up, because Cajun would take his mouth and he would put it over the water and wrestle it all the way down back to where the fountain came out of the platform. And he would just like growl and like just attack the water. And it was the funniest thing. And it's something that I am so upset, because I did have it on film. I did have it on camera. But the main reason that I started my Instagram account and this podcast account was to memorialize Toby and Fitz, because I lost everything due to, technology, whether it was sabotage or just damage in transportation. I lost everything. I have maybe 20 pictures of Cajun, and only one of them where he was about 6 to 8 months old. So unfortunately, I lost all of that stuff, and that's why, you know, I really wanted to make sure that Toby and Fitz have those spots and those funny little behaviors and things that they do, you know, caught on video for people to see and for me to remember, because I will forever vividly remember Cajun and that stupid fountain. But if I could just see it again, I know that it would just bring so much joy to my heart, because it was hilarious.
Reminds me of the picture that you took of Toby and Odie, like looking up at you with stuffing just everywhere in my old house.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we have that picture.
Yeah.
They're so proud of themselves.
They were so proud of themselves. And it was legitimately the most epic capture of their mayhem. Like, that picture, you could look at it and you'd be like, this is Odie and Toby, and you would know everything you needed to know from that picture.
Yep, absolutely.
It was so great.
So you get to Texas, Cats and Cajun in tow.
Yeah.
What did having a dog again mean to you?
That dog was everything to me. That dog was, like I said, he still went everywhere with me. I mean, we took kids. My ex-husband had 2 stepdaughters, and, you know, school, dance lessons, all the things, Cajun would go. He'd get in the car, and that was just how it was. But Cajun was only an only dog for a little over a year. In 2006, my ex-husband decided that he wanted another dog, so we got Izzy. And I think that I probably should have known then that Izzy was going to be the very, very first test to how I dealt with a bad situation with a dog when I realized that her birthday was June 6th of 2006. 666. She was a demon dog. And part of that I will accredit to the fact that my ex-husband wanted to be the one to train her, wanted to be the one who fed her, wanted to be the one that she was, he was her person. He wanted, him to be the one that she listened to. And it did cause a rift of disrespect between her and I. And it caused some problems later on when I added Fiona. So about 2006, early 2006, I had been working, and again, I was working for another type of medical office. For people, it was an orthopedic surgeon's office and a podiatrist. And I had been there for a while, and I told my ex-husband, look, this is not what I want to be doing. This is not where I want my life to go. I want to go back to school, and I want to become a veterinarian, and I want to find a different job and become a vet tech. And he was supportive, fortunately. And his sister and her husband, he worked in the veterinary field. He worked for sales for veterinary medications. And his father was actually a veterinarian. And they had like a 500-acre ranch, a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And we would go visit them, and we could ride horses and, drive the cattle and take the dogs. And it was a really, really fun experience. And Mike was always just so generous to me and always said, that I would be able to mentor under him and all of the things. And I loved it. I loved being a vet tech. Every day was different and fun, and there was just so many challenges, but we'll save all of that for another episode, because I'm going to bring a vet tech on to another episode so we can talk about what being a vet tech really looks like, because I can't have that conversation without another vet tech. But it was a challenging job, and for all of you out there who are thinking, oh yeah, it would be the best job in the world because you're playing with puppies and kittens all day, there's some of that.
Right. Well, and we've gone over some of that stuff on the podcast already.
Yeah.
Because you are involved in all of the procedures,
yeah,
not just the fun ones.
Yeah. But the best ones, and I think most dental, that's what I was going to say. Most technicians will agree that dental surgeries are the best because you get to clean a dog's teeth, and it's gross and disgusting, but God, it's satisfying. Chipping that plaque off the teeth is so satisfying. But I moved from corporate veterinary world to private veterinary world after about 4 years, and spent the rest of my time in private veterinary medicine and really enjoyed it. Worked for an amazing doctor, but I learned a lot. I saw a lot, working with the city and animal control and hoarding cases. And just, you see so many terrible things and you see so many wonderful things, but you really have to find that balance in that job, because you do see so many awful things and very traumatic things. But, there are days where you're also just back in the kennels scrubbing things down too. So some days are boring and some days are not. And you just kind of have to roll with the punches. In 2007, I've had migraines all my life. In 2007, I was starting to have a shift in my migraines. This is also the year that I got Fiona and added her to the pack. And this is, when we started to realize that there was going to be an issue with Izzy and Fiona, because about 6 months in, they had been separated for about the first 6 months because Fiona got parvo. And if you don't keep your dogs separated when they have parvo, then now all the dogs are at risk of getting parvo, and you have to bleach everything and sterilize and change your clothes. And it's just an awful thing to go through. And if you can avoid your dog getting parvo, I absolutely recommend it. That was something that they dubbed me in my first clinic, was the parvo queen, because I had a 90% turnaround rate on parvo dogs, which is really, really more about the owners bringing their dogs in the right amount of time than it is about me doing what was actually needed for the dogs. I mean, it's a little bit of both. But so we brought Fiona in. She had been surrendered by someone at my clinic. They had found her in a trash can, and they had said, if you don't take her, we're going to take her home and shoot her. And I said, not happening. Give the dog to me. My ex-husband was not pleased with me, but, he didn't make me give her up either. Now, I have Cajun, who's 90 pounds. I have Izzy, who's a good solid 100-pound German Shepherd, all black with tan feet, German Shepherd. And then I have this puppy, Fiona, who was probably 5 weeks old, 4 weeks old, should not have been away from the mother at this point. And then she gets parvo, and so she had to be really coddled and really, really taken care of and kept separate from the other dogs. And so we finally introduced them. Izzy immediately was picking on her and pushing her around, but Cajun really stood up for her and took care of her, and they became best friends. Eventually, Fiona grew into be what my best guess was a German Shepherd Lab Mastiff mix that was 120 pounds. She was my biggest dog ever. She was giant, and she was a big old sweet softy baby. And so on we went. And at this point now, I have, started going to the doctors more frequently because obviously something's wrong. They're telling me, these migraines are not normal. I've known this because I've had migraines since I was 11. And we go through all of this testing and all of this testing and all of this testing. And finally, in August of 2009, I resigned from my position as a vet tech because they told me that I was going to have a brain and spinal surgery procedure done in December of 2009. In this procedure, they removed the back of my skull and the rungs on C1 and C2 in my spinal cord because I have what is called a Chiari malformation, and it herniated. And basically what that means is the brainstem at the base of my skull ruptured. And to remove pressure, they had to remove the back of my skull and the rungs on C1 and C2, and they told me that if I didn't do it, the swelling wouldn't go down and it could potentially sever and kill me. So I had the surgery done, and on top of already feeling like I had lost pretty much everything because I had to give up my career, I had to give up veterinary medicine school, I had to, give up, a lot of my life. Very shortly after that, they say, 3-year recovery period. It's going to take you 3 years to get back on your feet, get back to normal, do all of the things. Halfway through that, in October of 2012, my ex-husband told me, why don't you go home, visit your family, get a second opinion at the University of Iowa, spend some time there. And while I was gone, about a month later, waiting to get into the department, the neurosurgery department at the University of Iowa, I got served divorce papers on my birthday. And in January of 2013, I drove back to Texas, and I got Cajun and Fiona. Now, I'm sure by this point, when this episode comes out, you guys will have already heard me tell the story of Izzy and Fiona with Lana. And in reference, I believe that's episode 27. So I'm not going to go too into detail about that whole thing again. But the infighting with Izzy and Fiona escalated, and Izzy almost killed Fiona, and I had to put her down. And that was March of 2010, just 3 months after I had had brain surgery, and my ex-husband was out of town, and I was home alone with his 2 daughters. And I let Fiona recover. I And in hindsight, that was a mistake. And I'm going to tell you guys that story now. I moved back to Iowa, and I knew that Fiona was scared of other dogs. Regardless of her massive size, she was scared of other dogs. And my parents had 4 small dogs at the time, and one of them was a very opinionated 20-pound dachshund named Spike. And I had told my mom, when my dogs are outside, I had to live with my parents for a month before I could get into the house that I was renting. I said, don't let your dogs out when my dogs are out, because, Fiona doesn't do well with other dogs since what happened with Izzy, and it was fine for a little while. And then one day my mom just said, it's fine. And she opened the door, and Spike charged Fiona, and you guys can guess how well that went. And unfortunately, 2 dogs died the next day. So now we're at, 3 traumatic losses of dogs, one being a childhood dog, and now 2 traumatic losses of my own personal dogs. And in the meantime, after I had put Izzy down, our neighbors decided to give us another dog, which was a Chihuahua that my ex-husband kept. So now I've also lost the Chihuahua because I didn't get to bring the Chihuahua with me when I moved back to Iowa. And so in January of 2013, it's just me and Cajun again. And we moved into our new house, and he was king of the castle. But at this point, Cajun's aging. He's starting to have hip problems. We come to find out that he has some kind of degenerative joint disease in his hip. He's starting to not be able to walk. He's starting to have issues getting up and down on the couch, on the bed, in and out of things. And he's happy. He's still in good spirits, but he's just not mobile. He's not the same Cajun. He's still playing the game, where we throw the blanket over the top of him and he and wrestles his way out of it. He was a big wiggle worm, and he had never bitten anybody, and he had never done anything wrong in his entire life. And he had, kids climbing on him, and he had other dogs fighting around him. And he was always just, the good old boy, and he was always just there. And seeing him decline, I thought, maybe it's just because he's not used to not having a companion. So in November of 2013, I adopted Toby, November 5th of 2013. And had I not done that, I don't know that I would have gotten another dog for some time, because Cajun, I lost Cajun on July 3rd of 2014. That was another traumatic death, unfortunately. He had been falling, and he was in a lot of pain. And as I said, amputation was not an option due to the fact that he was so old, and it was his right rear leg, and the problem was inside of his hip, so removing his leg was not going to relieve the pain. And I had a friend over who had a young child, and I had told her to, let's stay away from the dog. If we're going to sit on the couch with the dog, we have to be nice. We can't be jumping. We can't be crazy. But this is, an 8 or 9-year-old child, and she didn't listen, and she jumped on top of Cajun, and Cajun turned around and he nipped her in that little space right on the top of your lips, right underneath your nose. I don't know what that little dip right here is called, but it's that little dip at the top of your lips, right underneath your nose. And Iowa has bad laws when it comes to dog bites. And he would have been put into a 7 to 14-day hold quarantine. And obviously they went to the emergency room. She was fine. She didn't require stitches. It was all okay. But I knew what was going to happen, and I couldn't let Cajun be put into a 7 to 14-day hold and then put down, because he was already in pain. He was already having all these issues. I knew that they weren't going to take him out of the kennel. And so I did something that you guys should never, ever, ever do. I took him to the emergency vet, and I told him that he was being put down because of his pain, which he was. But had I told them he had bitten someone, they would not have put him down. They would have put him in a quarantine. And I mean, it was just one of those decisions that was the right decision for him. It was awful. When his ashes were ready, like a week later, I had to have my dad go and get him. I couldn't go back out there. And honestly, the next time that I went to the emergency vet was when I took you with Odie.
God, yeah. Which I think we've touched on that.
Yeah.
Where basically I said they won't let me in, and you were like, take that dog, walk into the like vestibule area, and hold your bleeding dog up, and they will take him.
They will let you in, and they did.
Yep.
But so yeah, I took Cajun, and I got to let him go. Not necessarily on my terms, but I got to be with him versus not being able to say goodbye to him, and that was how it went. And, he was part of the reason that Toby recovered. So we'll talk a little bit about Toby. I don't want to go too far into Toby because I feel like, we're getting close to this being the end of this episode. But we'll talk a little bit about Toby. I rescued Toby, like I said, to help Cajun kind of rebalance himself. And it worked. They were great friends. They got along so well. And Toby was such a feral little monster when I got him because he had been a bait dog.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a 12-pound Chihuahua mix to survive a bait dog situation to the point where he was, 2 or 3 years old when I adopted him is scarce. That does not happen. I do not know if it was just because he was so mean or if it was, just a sheer...
Which is weird because by the time Odie came around, like
he was not.
He was not. He was a sweetheart.
Well, Toby was completely rehabilitated.
Yeah.
When I first got Toby, he was mean. He bit everybody. He bit my sister. He bit my sister's boyfriend. He bit my mom. He bit my dad. He bit every person that came over. He was just mean. When I went to the shelter to pick out a dog, they were having a $5 day because they were trying to close that shelter down and turn it into the Kirkwood facility that is out there now. I don't know if it's still open or not, but at that point in time, they were trying to open the new veterinary technician school out at Kirkwood Community College. And so they were trying to empty out the shelter, and I went in and I sat in front of every single kennel and I talked to every single dog and I tried to pet every single one of them. And I remember there was a mother and a daughter in there, and they had told me that dog's not let anybody pet it. It's been here for a few weeks now and it won't let anybody near it. And I said, let's see if we can change that. I sat in front of that kennel for almost an hour before he finally stopped shaking in the back corner and finally approached me. I went up to the front desk and I said, I would like to get this dog out and take it into the meet and greet room. And they said, oh no, you can't get that dog out. And I said, I would like to get this dog out. And they said, that dog has bitten every single person that works here except for one person, and he's not here today, so you can't get that dog out. And I said, do you guys want to adopt this dog out or not? They made me sign every single paper except for the final signature on the adoption forms to take him into that room. And then they stood outside of that room, watched Toby climb into my lap and fall asleep, and then they hit the little intercom button and they said, so you're taking him, right? They're like, we won't even charge you. You can have no $5 fee. I wrote them a $30 check. I was so angry. But Toby was a lot of work. And Cajun was so, you would think that he would be reactive to dogs coming from the situation that he was.
Especially a large dog like Cajun.
Yeah. But I have this picture of them, and it's probably going to be the cover of this episode, where Cajun is sitting and he's got his back to me on the couch, and Toby is off to the left and he's kissing Cajun on the cheek. And that is my absolute favorite picture because that was maybe 2 weeks into the whole situation, and you can see how emaciated and how terrible, and like the coat color, like so yellow on Toby. Now it's vibrant white, but
now it's old man white.
Yeah, now it's old man white, but just the difference in those couple of weeks was incredible. And now, like you said, Toby loves everyone. He is the first person to greet everybody that walks in the door. He's got kisses for everybody.
And he's 13 years old.
Yeah.
Like, he still has the energy of a puppy chihuahua.
Only when people come over. The rest of the time, he's a potato. He would much rather sleep than do anything else, unless there's food involved.
Me too, Toby. Me too.
Unless there's food involved.
Same.
So, that was, if I hadn't had Toby to get me through that with Cajun, I don't know what I would have done. It would have been a lot harder. And I mean, obviously, I got choked up there. 10 years later, it's still really hard to talk about Cajun because I felt so guilty about that situation for so long. But again, it was just one of those things that was completely out of my control, and I couldn't have done anything different. I mean, it wasn't my fault. I can't control a child, or let alone someone else's child's actions.
Yeah.
And it really sucked because he was my best friend. I mean, he lived in 3 different states with me. He went through brain surgery. He went through divorce, and he went through, the beginning stages of me like figuring out who I was. And that's why this podcast is so important, because it took me so long to come back from all of that, from losing legitimately everything, to realizing that there is still a way to be active in this community and to help people understand that bad things happen, but you can always try to do your best and do better and fix the mistakes that you've made with your dog to make their lives better, to make your lives better. Even if it's just as simple as changing their food, or the crate training that you have gone through, or the leash training that you have gone through. Like, there are always things that you can do to make your dog's life more enjoyable. And looking back, are there things that I would have done differently? Absolutely. Absolutely. But working with animals, I started pet sitting when I was 13 years old. So 30 years of working with animals has taught me that they are the best things and the worst things that can happen to us. But there is nothing like the love of a dog.
Well, I think with that note, we'll wrap it up. I get to do this part now. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week on Straight Up Dog Talk.
Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited, produced, and co-hosted by Josh Wasta under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe to be sure you don't miss an episode, and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.